I think this year the Heisman's going to come down to the best player on the best team, not necessarily the best stats.
Personally, I think Katron Allen is better than Jeremiyah Love. When I look at him versus Bryce Underwood, it just jumps off the screen of how ready Bryce Underwood is probably going to look next season.
I think we're going to start seeing this happen. Texas Tech maybe being one of the first examples where a huge injection of money turns into a ton of wins, and then that all of a sudden makes you a really good program to be at. But I think what's going to be more impactful to that conference, which is never going to be a great conference because all of those coaches end up getting bigger jobs. Whether it's 1 year or 2 years from now, they're all going to find a spot.
And now it seems like teams really don't know what to do with Mizzou's offense. And then you have Ahmad Hardy, who is the best running back in college. He keeps you on your toes, and you can't arm tackle that guy either. So I'm just really impressed with Mizzou's offense just in general. Welcome back to another episode of First and Cam alongside my co-host Evan, here to recap week 4 of college football. Exciting weekend of football. A lot of major whoopings this weekend. You went 4-2 betting. We'll talk about your bets from last week, and we'll give our preview of our betting show next episode. But to jump into week 4, I would love to start with the AP poll. And we saw there's a lot of movement.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen Illinois drop 14 spots. Miami is now number 2. I will disagree with the AP poll and their voters on Iowa State sitting at number 14. I just think that's a dangerous spot as far as expectations and where that team is. Mizzou still not getting any love, still in the 20s. BYU rounding out at the top 25 at 25. My first take that when I look at this list is Penn State being in the top 5 and Oregon not. That is my first disagreement when I look at the top 5 and who really belongs. Because I think Miami and Ohio State aren't necessarily a clear cut above, but I think they've earned that 1 and 2 spot. LSU, I think they could have played better against Clemson, but they're still undefeated and they look good. Georgia, obviously, they look good too. And then Oklahoma at 7, Florida State at 8. I don't really understand them kind of still being in that weird 8 spot. But what do you see in this AP poll that you don't like? Because my biggest gripes right now are Penn State and Iowa State.
Well, I think for me, it's got to be. I'm looking at LSU sitting at 4, and they kind of have the same thing Penn State's got going on, which is they don't really have an impressive win. We looked at them beating Clemson as like, wow, they did it on the road. But even then, they only scored 17 points, and that was kind of a dogfight, and we thought LSU had a much better roster. Then they beat Florida, and it just turns out that Florida's not a really good team. And even though they got 5 turnovers, they only scored 20 points. And so I look at LSU as a team that I don't know that they've proven that they are worthy of a top 5. They're certainly, if they played, I believe, Oregon today on a neutral site, I think Oregon would be favored by 2.5. And so I don't know. I don't see how LSU could be ranked higher than them. Certainly Penn State being at 3. This is just a preseason. Like, we hope they're going to be good and we hope they're going to get to kind of their potential. But we'll get to 3 versus 6 this weekend, which is probably why Penn State's still where they are, just for ratings and such. So that's my first disagreement. I also don't like the fact that Florida State dropped the spot, even though they boat raced Kent State. In my opinion, I think Florida State has been the most consistent team probably on this list. Georgia's had struggles. Ohio State's kind of, done what they've done. Miami's been pretty good as well. I'm not sure how good that Notre Dame team is, and so we'll have to look at that win. But in my opinion, Florida State has been incredibly impressive this entire season, and I can't wait for them to match up with Miami. But Texas A&M as well, sitting at 9. I think those two teams could certainly leapfrog Oklahoma, even though I'm a big fan of them. And so I think LSU should probably be substituted for Florida State. I think Penn State and Texas A&M could switch or somewhere in that area. But I don't know. There's certainly an SEC.
I think after that Penn State Oregon game this weekend, those two teams have a chance to flip flop spots.
Well, so the question becomes: let's say Oregon gets them by 14 points. I don't know what the line on the game is, but let's say Oregon beats them by 2 touchdowns. How far does Penn State drop in your opinion?
They probably fall right at that like Texas A&M Florida State spot. You're probably right because I could see Texas A&M, leapfrogging Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma's in that leapfrog spot where Florida State, Texas A&M have another impressive week that Oklahoma could suffer that droppage like Florida State did. Ole Miss making that climb at 13. We talked about it a couple episodes ago with the last 4 and first 4 out. They were kind of trembling on that last, like, CMI. I don't know if they might make it. Meanwhile, I had Illinois
Right.
making it. So
Right.
I think that take was aged terribly within 2 weeks. But I like Ole Miss. I love their quarterback and what he's doing. The kid from Ferris State, Trinidad Chambers. He's a dark horse for making a push for the Heisman. I don't think his
Yes.
stats will keep up with everybody with the uses that he's had. He's only thrown 62 passes this year, but he's already at 700 something yards, and he hasn't turned the ball over yet. And he's running the ball really well. He looks like he's doing the same thing he was doing at Ferris State. It's actually unbelievable.
It really is. The competition doesn't matter for him, which is
No.
fantastic. And that's exactly what you hope for when you get a transfer quarterback like that. My question to you would be, let's say Penn State beats Oregon. How far does Oregon fall?
I mean, if Penn State is as good as the AP poll voters have been telling us, then not very far.
Hmm.
So I mean, maybe they fall to 10, but they can't be behind Indiana. They can't be behind Texas Tech. I know Texas Tech had a really good showing against Utah. One of those games I went the other way for you, but I don't think Oregon can fall outside of the top 10 if they lose. Now, if they lose by a lot, then maybe so. Like, Indiana smoked Illinois, and I actually was surprised that Illinois is even ranked after that.
Yeah,
So,
that was bad. I'm looking at that 15 through 21 spot. In these, I feel like are the most dangerous teams. I've got
right.
Tennessee, Georgia Tech, Alabama, Vanderbilt, Michigan, Missouri, Mizzou, and then USC. And I feel like any one of these teams with one win could leapfrog into that top 10 spot quickly. And they all have the opportunity to do that. Tennessee, obviously, with their schedule, Bama, they do is beat Georgia coming up this week, and then that they're in. You look at Mizzou; they've got a couple really good games ahead that they could also leapfrog to. So,
Right.
and to be fair, like Michigan too, yeah, they don't have the same sort of schedule until they play Ohio State. But like, they're a team where they had one loss to a solid Oklahoma team. I kind of wrote them off as they're not going to make the playoff. They're kind of in that spot. If Penn State has a
Yeah.
bad showing, they could be right there as well.
Yeah. And uh to piggyback off that 15 to 21 spot, I'm looking at Michigan who had a good game against Nebraska. And we'll talk about Nebraska and Raiola later. But Notre Dame and USC sitting at 22 and 21. I
Mhm.
really wonder what kind of respect those two programs are going to get as the season goes on. Because I don't know if Notre Dame's going to have another impressive win throughout the season to really justify moving them up past all these other teams. So I think they've kind of played themselves out of the playoffs at this point. And I think USC, if they can somehow make it to the Big Ten championship, they have a chance. I just don't see them ever getting ranked above Alabama, Georgia Tech, Tennessee, Ole Miss, or even Indiana at this point.
Looking at USC's schedule, they don't have a whole heck of a lot. So they have, let's see, Illinois this weekend. And I don't know that Illinois is a team, even though it's at home for Illinois. I don't know if Illinois can compete with
Mm,
USC. They have a really explosive offense. Actually, very surprising. It's been not as talked about. Then they have Michigan at
right.
home, which will be a really fun game. Then they have Notre Dame. They go to Notre Dame the following week after that. There's a bye week between Illinois and Michigan.
Mm,
And then they have Nebraska as well. And then they end up finishing with Oregon and then UCLA. So I think USC has, and I don't think they're a team that has the roster to go to the playoff just yet, but their defense is good enough, certainly. They could
mm,
they could make some noise. They could beat Michigan. They could beat Notre Dame. Everybody can beat Notre Dame right now that do not play any defense. And then they have a chance to get at Oregon. And that would just be if we're looking at a two-loss USC team, let's call one loss to Oregon and one loss to Michigan. I mean, they'll have a let's call one loss to Notre Dame. They'll have a case to be kind of
right.
right there. They won't make it,
Yeah.
but they will have a huge case.
So looking just at the rest of TCU, I will have to kind of study them a little bit. I don't know the justification of putting them in the top 25 other
Eh,
than just being undefeated. BYU is kind of the same thing. The Big 12, outside of those two teams in Iowa State, not really that impressive to me. I know Utah and Texas Tech are good teams, so and so, but I just don't. I see them just a level above or a level below everybody else as far as the
really?
Big Ten and SEC. Everybody in the Big
Okay.
12, I'm not. I'm just not really seeing it. I know that they're going to get some playoff spots, but I'm not really seeing it as far as the Big 12 this year.
We'll talk about Texas Tech a little more as they beat Utah, which I did not have coming. Texas Tech has as good of a D line as anybody in the country, minus Miami at this point. They control the trenches. I look There was a part of that game where it felt like Texas Tech could really just play bad offense, and it didn't matter because Utah couldn't do anything. And I thought Utah would be the more physical team, but it just shows that if you get a bunch of money, you get the right players in the portal, you can really turn up. So in my opinion, Texas Tech probably has the ability to match up with a Big Ten SEC team. And if they can keep it close 1 and 2 quarters, like quarter three, quarter four, put it like this, they scored, I believe, 20 points in the second half with their backup quarterback, who's a sophomore.
Right.
And so they've got the kind of talent that I think should scare just about anybody who comes and plays them. To me, the Big 12 is theirs to lose. And they're a team where, man, they match up with a team like Texas, who has a bad offensive day. They
Mm.
might put a couple over top on you, and the next thing you know, it's a dogfight. So Texas Tech is a sleeper for, I think, an upset in the playoff if they handle business and win out in the Big 12.
Good note on them. As far as Heisman odds goes, Fernando Mendoza is now leading at plus 800. John Mateer sliding down one spot at plus 900. Carson Beck is cracked the top three
Hmm.
alongside Dante Moore, plus 1300 to win Heisman. Gunnar Stockton from Georgia, plus 1400. Interesting pick. And then Josh Hoover, the quarterback from TCU. I guess that's why they justify the 24 ranking right there at 1400. All quarterbacks, I would really like to see Ahmad Hardy or another position player in this Heisman ballot. It's going to be tough for a running back to win Heisman anymore, just as valuable as these quarterbacks are, especially on paper. I
Yeah.
really just feel like, they're just, I don't know if they're not going to ever give it to a running back anymore, but starting off, going into week 5 with no running backs on it at all, or no receivers, nobody else, it kind of frustrating to me because I would, even being a Mizzou fan, I would like to see Ahmad Hardy on there, but I think he's actually proven that at least through these 4 games that he's the real deal.
For him in his situation, I think that when he gets to play Alabama and then they get to play Auburn, which Auburn's a really good football team,
Mhm.
um, I think that's where he can really move up the rankings because they go Bama at home, Auburn on the road, Vandy on the road, Texas A&M. And so those 4 games, if he puts together a stretch where he's going for 120, 150 yards, maybe 2 of those 4, couple touchdowns, I think he could work himself into that. I think this year the Heisman's going to come down to the best player on the best team, not necessarily the best stats. And so I look at, in my opinion, like Dante Moore probably has the best chance at winning the Heisman just because he will probably win the most games. And I'm assuming that Oregon goes to the Final Four and maybe even ends up in the national championship. So for me, it's him. And then my two would be John Mateer right after that. Again, he'd have to win out, same thing. And then Mendoza at Indiana, he's up there as well. I think he has a chance to certainly rack up he has 975 passing yards already, 14 touchdowns, no INTs, a
Right.
77% completion percentage. So in my opinion, he could be up there too. I would love to see, like you said, Ahmad Hardy be on this list. It's just going to be tough when Bo Perbula does a lot through the air and on the ground. And I think some of that shine is going to be taken away from him,
That's a
unfortunately.
good point.
And so when it does come down to playing Bama, at home, which one of those guys is going to shine more? I happen to think you're going to need the quarterback to play better, and that's probably going to cannibalize some Heisman votes for both of them, in my opinion.
Mhm. Did you see the controversial play in the Oklahoma Auburn game where basically Oklahoma, its first touchdown basically should not have counted. And they had an illegal substitution play where you kind of hide a guy on the sideline during the substitution. And it's not, I mean, it's a 15-yard unsportsmanlike penalty. I don't know what the rule is in like high school or in the NFL, but in college, it's an unsportsmanlike penalty. And basically, the play should not have counted. The SEC admitted it hours later. How do you how do you miss something like that, or how do you, as a referee, how do you let that happen? I don't understand.
Well, referees are human beings. Like we know that. I think the play was he was jogging off the field as if he was going off, stood, so he was
Yeah, right.
set,
Yeah,
and then, he took off. And so, first off, if you're Auburn and you're that cornerback, yes, you see that guy going off the field, but you also have to keep an eye on like there's 2 guys over here, not just one. So I look at the refs and I think, yeah, maybe they blew it, but you could look at the refs and say they also blew a play dead where Auburn had a fumble six that they called back, actually. Oklahoma's running the ball for his first quarter. It was like 4 minutes into the game. Guy
mhm.
gets tackled, rolls on him, ball pops out, and then Auburn had a touchdown taken away. So a 14-point swing there. I think the refs are going to miss things. I think that game didn't come down to those 2 calls. There were plenty of opportunities. I think Auburn took advantage over the top with Cam Coleman. It's just they didn't make enough of those plays. And I thought Oklahoma did a really good job. And again, they got like a safety or something to close the game out. And so I would love to say the refs missed it, and I would love to say the refs cost Auburn that game. But at the end of the day, like that game boiled down to more than just two plays, and refs are always going to miss calls, and so I can't be too upset about them missing that one. But that's a tough one.
Agreed. I mean, I think if you're trying to run a play like that, I don't necessarily even agree that it should be a 15-yard penalty. It is in the rule book, so they have to abide by that. But I think that type of deceiving play calling type, I mean, it's football. It's a game. Like you
Yeah,
should be allowed to do stuff like that. So I'm not saying that they need to take away the rule or it shouldn't be a penalty anymore and teams should start doing it. But I don't know. It's college football. Sometimes some of those type of stuff that stuff works in amateur football. Well, I really can't call it amateur football anymore. But
maybe
Michigan versus
semi-pro.
Nebraska. This is a big young QB matchup. Dylan Raiola versus Bryce Underwood. I have my strong opinions on Dylan Raiola. I'm not really a believer yet. I think his mechanics are really lazy, and I don't think he has the actual like literal foot speed to like really be a good NFL quarterback. I know he's young and I know he's got at least another year left, but when I look at him versus Bryce Underwood, it just jumps off the screen of how ready Bryce Underwood is probably going to look next season. And even now, he's still kind of raw, but the way that he throws, the way he moves, obviously he had that long touchdown run, and we'll get into the game in a second. But I think those are two good examples of two different quarterbacks who are projected to be high, but I think Bryce Underwood is the clear cut better QB right now.
Bryce Underwood is definitely your more prototypical college quarterback. Can run it, can throw it, and he's a freak. Like he's closer to Cam Newton, I think, than anybody else we've seen in college football. And that's high praise for a true freshman playing his fourth game. Dylan Raiola is probably going to be the most pro ready of all the guys that come out next year. And I know you aren't a huge fan just yet,
Mm.
but there aren't any other college quarterbacks in the game that have taken a 5 step or 7 step drop from under center. He's the only one. He's the only pro style quarterback. And to be fair, his numbers are good. I think he's a little slow. His tempo could certainly
Yeah,
pick up. He holds the ball a little too low for me. Usually you see quarterbacks holding it probably shoulder height.
yeah.
He's real like low in the pocket, so it slows his release down. But he's got a cannon of an arm. We saw that multiple times. He's fairly accurate and he's also decent on the run. And so I look at him and the thing about him specifically as a quarterback and why I think he's going to be okay is he's not trying to be a better athlete than he is. He stays in the pocket. He steps into the pocket. He typically maneuvers really well. There was a play where he stepped up and he got clobbered, but first blitzer came through and
Mm.
he sidestepped that one beautifully. And then he just got punished because there was another blitzer he didn't account for. But it's plays like that where I look at it and say, okay, that's what you have to do in the NFL to be successful. And he's already shown that he has all the other physical tools. You can speed up his drop, you can speed up his throwing motion. I think he's going to be a really good player. And I'm not going to compare him to Andrew Luck, but he runs the closest offense we've seen to that Stanford Andrew Luck run offense. And so, in my opinion, he's going to be a very good pro. It's going to take some time. He's young too.
So other good players on the screen that I just jumped off the screen. Justice Haynes, the running back to me
Yeah.
on Michigan. I mean, he's a beast. I think it's hard to project a running back going in the first round. I know Ashton Genty was kind of he was a different caliber of player, but and maybe we'll see running backs in the later part of the first round, but he's definitely early second round guy to me if he's not late first round, depending on who's drafting. Like the Chiefs need a running back. This guy can go 28, 27, or depending on where the Chiefs go this year. I don't really know how good they're going to be, but um, they had a play. What was it like in the third quarter? And Jordan Marshall had a run, and it was one of the best, like just pure blocking like schemes that you've just ever seen this season. And it was just one of those things where you watch it on tape and you're an offensive coordinator. That's the type of tape that you're showing from weeks on end, and just plays that are executed like that, where the running back goes virtually untouched. This game
Yeah.
was really fun back and forth. I was kind of shocked to see Michigan go in there and play so comfortably.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if the Nebraska environment is underrated, but I know that crowd can have a real effect on games. And it was good to see Bryce Underwood go into a road environment, his second time doing it, and being able to play and look calm. I think that's the overall theme of why I think I like him so much is because he just looks like he's been here before, and he has a very, very mature body. Like he definitely doesn't even look 18, 19 years old,
Mm-mm.
but the way that he plays within the pocket too, it just looks very comfortable for him. And I think that he was in the same style offense that Nebraska was in. I think that he'd be able to run it. I really do think so.
He certainly struggles to pass the ball and see his reads. He's a true freshman, so I don't think anybody's going to knock him for that. But when you talk about him being comfortable, it's one of the reasons I picked Michigan to go on the road with the true freshman quarterback and win, and at least and cover against Nebraska. It was he'd done it with Oklahoma before, so he'd seen that environment already. And then you add on top of the fact that he has incredible, like the first touchdown of the game was him going 34 yards or whatever it was, right up the middle. Great play design, but also
Mhm.
he has the physical tools to outrun guys and like outrun angles as well. With him, I think it's going to be getting his reads right. Right now, it's like we have a good running game, and we can talk about Justice Haynes and where he fits on top of all the college running backs. It's kind of like a great show right now,
Right.
but I look at Bryce Underwood and I go, okay, we can scheme open guys for him to hit. He did hit some deep balls, which was good. He doesn't have the best receiving core right now, but I do think you get another tight end in there, transfer portal, or just recruit. You get a couple receivers in there, and all of a sudden that offense is ridiculously deadly, and they still
Mhm.
have that run game. Like Michigan's always going to have a really good O line and a really good D line and probably a really good running back. You give them a really good quarterback now, and they keep that physicality. All of a sudden, we're looking at a national championship contending team, and they've got 2 more years with him. So
Right.
I'm actually really excited about kind of what that team looks like in the future. I'm not an Ohio State fan. I like to see them win though. But I think Michigan's going to be very formidable next year and maybe even this year too. I can't just say they're going to squeeze by or Ohio State's going to blow them out. I think it's going to be a really good game as well.
Well, I think this is the year that's gonna that the Big Ten might separate from the SEC.
Wow.
I think the Big Ten after the end of this year is gonna prove that they are the premier conference just flat out. And I think it's gonna start with the just the depth of the QB play in the Big Ten compared to the SEC. I mean, you look at the list of the QBs in the Big Ten, and I mean, it's hard to argue that there's many SEC quarterbacks that could fill up a room like that. And I just think that talent is amazing for the sport, but I do think that's why the Big Ten is going to end up better than the SEC this year. And that might be the new trend for 2025 going on forward until the 2030s, honestly.
Well, I think the SEC has pulled a lot from the NFL when it comes to how they play defenses. I think that's having a huge impact. I think the SEC has more athletes in the DB linebacker like rooms more than the Big Ten might. Big Ten does really well with edge, and so does I guess the SEC as well. But I look at the SEC being just ahead on defense, and so we'll get a couple of these cross conference matchups in the playoffs, which will be really fun to look at when teams are fully developed. Not be as healthy, but they will be fully developed. So we'll
Right.
certainly get that. Let me kind of transition to who you see as like running back one right now. Because I look at Justice Haynes. He's been a game breaker in every game that they've played. And he's been a guy who's put together a 40 to 60-yard run every single game. So he's doing it. I've got Jeremiyah Love, who there's no doubt that he's a stud. He's one of the best players.
Definitely.
And then I have Ahmad Hardy as well, sitting there, and he's a game wrecker. He's the guy that's kind of put the Mizzou offense on his back a little bit and given them the dynamic ability to be really good on the ground and in the passing game. So who
Well,
would you
my
how
running
would you
back
rank
one,
those three?
my running back one is Ahmad Hardy, and I
Okay.
think he is a cut above the rest as far as turning what would be second and 12, second and 11 to second and 7, second and 4,
Hmm.
and he's just so physical. He's like a bowling ball, and he's just so thick, and his upper body is so strong compared to his lower body, and he's carrying this Mizzou offense. I know Prabula does a lot on the ground, and he does really well passing the ball, but without without Ahmad Hardy, this team definitely. I don't think they would have beaten South Carolina, honestly.
Mm-mm.
In that Kansas game, I mean, you saw how that game went, and Jamal Roberts had that long touchdown at the end. But even then, it still took two 100-yard rushers to win that game, even. And so I would have him as my running back one. Running back two to me right now is probably Jeremiah Love. It's hard to say because I personally I think Katron Allen is better than Jeremiah Love, and he's the backup running back at Penn
At Penn
State.
State,
I
right?
think he's better, and I think he's better than Nicholas Singleton. And so, and maybe that's just my projection as far as what I think they're going to be in the NFL. But right now, I'm going to go Ahmad Hardy, Katron Allen, and then I'll go Jeremiah Love at number three.
Hmm.
There's a lot of guys. Justice Haynes, I mean, is probably right there at 4 or 5. But if we're going my top three, I'm gonna go Ahmad Hardy, Katron Allen, and then Jeremiah Love.
I would put Justice Haynes probably at two. Jeremiah Love probably is the most talented of those running backs, but I don't think I've
I
seen
think
him.
he's the most complete for like plug and play in the
Yes,
NFL right now, catching the
100%.
ball. Yeah,
You could certainly see him on NFL rosters right now. I think Justice Haynes has had to do the same thing you're saying Ahmad Hardy has had to do. I don't think Michigan wins against Nebraska without him. I don't think that they're ultra competitive against Oklahoma without him. And so I think he's a huge threat in the run game. The Michigan offensive line is incredibly dominant. Mizzou offensive line
mhm.
probably doesn't get enough credit for how good they are. But I look at Ahmad Hardy as one with you. I look at Justice Haynes as probably being two because he's responsible for what this offense actually is, just like Ahmad Hardy is.
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, the running back, it feels like we're entering a great era of running backs. We just had a good draft last year. This year, I mean, you've got Isaac Brown from Louisville. You've got Mekhi Hughes from Oregon. I mean, there's so many guys. Jamal Haynes from Georgia Tech. I mean, we haven't even talked about, oh my God, I'm name is leaving me right now. Le'Veon Moss from Texas A&M.
Thanks,
I mean,
Eminem.
there's
Yeah.
so many guys that are gonna start trembling to that second round, and we look at the draft, and there's guys that are getting drafted in the second round, asking for guaranteed contracts, and so
Yeah.
that's starting to be a big tag. If you can make it to that second round, you're gonna get paid, and I think that's where a lot of these running backs are gonna fall because offensive linemen, edge rushers, and QBs are just so important to get in that first round that if you're not a, a, a team in a lat and like the Eagles are going to be drafting between 29 and 32, they don't need a running back. They got Saquon. But if you're the Chiefs or you're I don't know who's going to be really good this year. I mean, the Rams don't need a running back, but just a team like that, like they're looking for another young
Yeah.
back
Another
to come
piece.
in there and play right away. And I think that's where a lot of these guys could fall. And that's really the best situation for you.
Well, let me, I guess, break down why I think running back position has become so prominent and why we're seeing guys have the effect they're having. Is we see in the NFL is everybody's running this too high shell. You have two high safeties, and then your corners kind of play off like they're kind of playing cover four, so they could take a deep drop, or they're kind of playing up like cover two. They have their 10 yards that they're
Right.
monitoring. Anybody that's coming out is they're responsible for. Growing up, you and I both know this. We both play quarterback. You know, understand the game very well. You go two high safeties, that is automatically run game. You
Right.
automatically run the football at that time. And so you have two guys way up there. Now our linebacking core is probably two guys in the box, and then you have 3 to 4 down linemen. I think running backs have had to avoid one less defender, which is starting to make I think
Mm.
their numbers pop and their ability to have an impact on the game much greater. And so we'll see guys in the NFL have huge success, but we'll see guys in college as well. As the NFL game trickles down to college, as they run that
Right.
too high shell, especially with teams that have a ton of athletes, the running game is going to be that much more important. We're going to start seeing running backs probably go back to that old Alabama where it was like you had Derrick Henry, and then before that you had Mark Ingram. You just had so many guys that came through who were so dominant because you have to play them a certain way. I think we're going to start seeing that again back in college football.
Right. And that makes a good point because I think there was an era even back when you talk about with Bama where they had two, three running backs deep that could go, that could start and go first or second round. And I think that's what we're going to start seeing. Penn State, I mean, is a great example of that. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, who I think will flip flop once they get to the NFL. But you're going to get really high value guys that are willing to share the running back room, and that can make the whole difference in a season. And it makes a huge difference for Michigan. And they got, what's the kid's name? Jordan Marshall. He had that big run, and then they got, obviously, they have.
Justice
Oh
Haynes.
my gosh, Justice Haynes. So it's like those two guys right there can take a lot of load off of Bryce Underwood and help him settle into the games, and that's where you're going to see Michigan to start climbing. And so teams that have that, Mizzou the same way with the
Mhm.
Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts,
Notre Dame the
those
same
two
way.
guys, yeah, being able to go over 100 yards, you have two guys that are able to do that in the same game. That accounts for you know 5 to 10 less dropbacks for a quarterback that could result in turnover.
It also speeds the game up a little bit. You don't have as much time to have the quarterback throw the ball, so you certainly have the clock
Right.
running. Uh, you also wear down a defensive line. The easiest way to slow down a pass rush is to go right at them. Pass rushers don't want to stop the run. That's not what they're designed to do. And so, how do you combat? excellent and incredible edge rushers, you run right at them. That's the way you do it. And so I think the running back position is going to be incredibly important. I think over the next probably 5 to 7 years of football until we see the next like iteration. I think we could start seeing offensive linemen be a little bit different. We could start seeing kind of more of a hybrid tight end fullback. Like, I think we're going to start seeing a new like transition into what football looks like, and it's going to be a lot more ground and pound. We've had great quarterback play over the past 10, 15 years. That pendulum could certainly swing to a running back dominant game, running backs getting MVPs, running backs getting Heisman. So I think this class of guys might be at the front of that. And we're probably a year or two away from us saying the running back's the most important player on this team. And it's multiple teams you talk about that.
Fair. Um, and speaking of just kind of staying on the offensive side of the ball, I want to talk about Mizzou's offense because it really feels like to me that Mizzou finally has an SEC level offense. And what I
Mm,
mean by that is guys in the slot, guys on the outside that can make plays vertical across the field, make contested catches, running backs that can make catches out of the backfield, two running backs at the same time on the same field, tight end Brett Norfleet that can go up and not only can he block really well, but he can make sideline catches and stuff like that. And then you have Fabula who can do both. And it's just kind of crazy to me that it took Mizzou this long to be able to get this talent pool on the same roster. I mean, you have Joshua Manning, Marquise Johnson, Kevin Coleman, Norfleet, Ahmad Hardy, Jamal Roberts. Like the list kind of goes on for Mizzou. And that's not even talking about the true freshman receiver who named last name I forget to pronounce, but they have real weapons. And I've always thought that Mizzou, A, on defense looked just a size smaller than everybody else in the SEC.
yeah.
And then on offense, their weapons only ran about one or two players deep. And if those guys were getting locked down by just top-notch SEC defensive backs, then they really didn't know what to do. And now it seems like teams really don't know what to do with Mizzou's offense. And then you have Ahmad Hardy, who is the best running back in college. He keeps you on your toes, and you can't arm tackle that guy either. So I'm just really impressed with Mizzou's offense just in general. I think Drinkwitz really did a good job recruiting and finding all of this talent and having them mesh together so well. And I think Mizzou should start getting some more respect in the AP poll. I know they haven't gotten out of that 20 range yet, but they keep putting together some impressive games and they knock off some of these SEC teams. They're going to have to get the respect that they deserve at some point.
They certainly will. I think that, well, right now, Mizzou is fifth in total offense in the country and fifth in rushing at 1192 in total yards, almost 1,200 rushing yards this season. One thing that I think Eli Drinkwitz doesn't get enough credit for is when he came to Mizzou at Appalachian State, is where he was before. He was the head coach, offensive coordinator. He gave that spot up last year to, I believe his name is Kirby Moore, who was the
Yep.
OC at Fresno State as well. And I think that's made all the difference for this football team. They've kind of begun to build the identity, which is we're going to run the ball, we're going to have a physical offensive line, and we're going to have a dual threat quarterback. I think Brady Cook last year just like really couldn't like execute at that level. That really wasn't what he was designed to do. And Michigan or Mizzou had been just kind of floating between guys. And now I think they've established that identity. I look at their offensive position. I say, okay, it's probably an A quarterback. They have an A college quarterback. He can run, he can throw. The running back position is an A plus. The offensive line is probably an A minus to A. And then they have receivers at about a B plus. So they have guys that can get you over the top. They have guys that can run right through you, and they have guys that can block for everything you need, plus a quarterback. So they're going to be a formidable a team, and they have the schedule to get the respect they're looking for. They
Yeah.
have Alabama in 3 weeks. They've got Auburn the week after that, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, and then they end up with Oklahoma as the 22nd of November. So they've got plenty of opportunities to play themselves into the playoff picture. I think a two-loss Mizzou with with the impressive offense they put together could be a super solid lock, and I think that they'd be a team that you would not want to match up with. So I'm really looking forward to them blossoming. This could be the year that they kind of put themselves on the map as we're a top 3 or 4 SEC team, a little
Mhm.
more NIL, and you never know.
Right. And just looking back at the AP poll, Iowa State at 14, Georgia Tech at 16. From what we're looking at as far as what Clemson looks like is what their loss against Syracuse, that win is starting to look a little bit more less impressive as the year goes on. And
Yep.
Iowa State, who has just beaten everybody in front of them, but it just hasn't been that impressive to me. I, I don't know. I'm not saying Mizzou should be jumped all the way from 20 to 14, but I definitely think that there's Vanderbilt too included are three teams that ahead of Mizzou that I definitely don't think they're better than them.
Well, They will have the games to play. Again, we talk Tennessee, Georgia Tech, Alabama, Vanderbilt, Michigan, Mizzou, USC. Those are 3, 6, 7 teams right there who certainly could leapfrog a whole bunch of teams that lose, or if they have impressive wins. So if I was any one of those teams, I think I'm in the right position. I think Michigan probably has the best position where they've already had a loss. They're still inside the top 20, and they could play themselves into the top 15, top 12, and maybe even a playoff spot. But I would not be upset if I was Mizzou at 4-0. You really haven't played the best schedule yet. You played South Carolina, played them good. You played Louisiana, you played Kansas, kind of tough, which it shouldn't have been, but it was. So they're getting to the meat of their schedule in about 2 or 3 weeks from now. That'll be when they really start getting their respect. So I wouldn't be too worried if I was a Mizzou fan about where they are right now. So I want to transition a bit to just the coaching carousel that college football turns into every single year. You and I were talking a little bit about the American Conference and just the teams that could sneak into the playoff. We look at Memphis, South Florida. In fact, I think Navy is leading
Right.
that conference right now. Those are
Yeah.
three teams that could certainly find themselves in the playoff, right? And they have to win out, of course. But I think what's going to be more impactful to that conference, which is never going to be a great conference because all of those coaches end up getting bigger jobs, whether it's 1 year or 2 years from now, they're all going to find a spot. So here are some guys that I think people should keep an eye on. And I even forgot one, but I'll name them after. So I've got Memphis's head coach, Ryan Silverfield. He's going to be a guy that's going to get a bigger job, right? Memphis seems to be a place where Mike Norvell, I believe,
Yeah.
was there as well. So like that's just a stepping stone job. South Florida, Alex Golesh. He's going to be a guy who is going to get a job at a big school. We'll see where he lands. You have Tulane as well, even though they got beat pretty bad by Ole Miss. Even Lane Kiffin was like, John Summerall is going to end up in the SEC somewhere. He's going to end up with a good job, certainly. And then I look at a couple other schools that have coaches where they're probably outperforming their roster. Is Indiana with Kurt Signetti. I think that
Yeah.
he's done a fantastic job. He's 15-2, I believe, as a coach, and his only two losses are to Ohio State, I believe, if that's right. Um, so he lost to the national championship or to the national champion twice last year, and they've got a good schedule to where he could put a stamp on a couple wins. And then lastly is Syracuse Fran Brown. I think that he's done a fantastic job with his guys. His team obviously loves him. He has great buy-in from his players. His quarterback, starting quarterback goes down, who's leading the country in passing yards where he was. Backup comes in and they score even more points. So I look at like that as those are probably five coaches or so that could end up at new jobs at bigger schools. And what I think it does is ends up gutting out. You mentioned Indiana could be, or I mentioned maybe before that they could be a top-notch Big Ten school, or the Big Ten could separate from the SEC. The reason I don't think that is your bottom outside of at this point right now, it's Oregon, it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, it's Penn State. Those four. Outside of that, every job that's not those four, maybe even USC a little bit, is considered a job where you'd go to a bigger school if the opportunity presented itself. And so I think there's always going to be a Class A and a Class B in the SEC, in the Big Ten, because those schools and those head coaches are going to move on. Texas Tech head coach is really good. So there are a
Yeah.
ton of guys out there who I think we look at hot seat and whose job might be available. I look at this more as, man, which one of these coaches is going to get a shot? And I'll ask you, if let's say Florida fires Billy Napier, um, he's gone. Like who are you replacing him with? If Arkansas fires Sam Pittman, who are you going to replace him with? Who are the coaches that you feel like are the most sought after right now?
So let's starts at Kirk Signetti with what he's been able to do at Indiana and what he could potentially do in an SEC school because he's proven that one, he brought a lot of talent that he evaluated at James Madison over to Indiana, and you saw how good they were last year, and some of that carryover from that roster on James Madison is still on Indiana, and you see what they're doing. And so I think it starts there, honestly, because I don't know how you turn that down. I really don't, unless you really feel like you want to leave your imprint on Indiana football, which I don't know how much that means to him. Probably not that much because Florida's going to be able to offer so much that
Mm,
you're really not going to be able to turn it down, even if you really thought that Indiana has been good to you and the resources that you have are enough to win. The real reality is that Indiana doesn't have the resources to win, no matter who's coaching that team. I mean, I don't think Nick Saban could walk in there and coach Indiana and win a national championship. I don't think James Franklin could do that. I don't think Ryan Day could do it. I mean, he could barely do it at Ohio State. And so the Arkansas job has money, And I think that Sam Pittman's probably going to be let go just because they need an overhaul of the whole roster.
Hmm.
For me, it's hard to tell because it's so early that some of these schools have a chance to turn it around. I just it's just I think a lot of this poaching is gonna be done to guys who have good or bad seasons. Like,
For a year. But yeah, Dan Mullen.
yeah, and that's what I was thinking. He had a better record than, or he was like
Yes.
34-15 when he got
Yes.
fired
Got
at
fired.
Florida. And you're looking at what Napier's doing right now, and it's like, okay, he's definitely going to be out, but I don't think they want to sabotage the rest of the season considering the talent that's on their roster. I think they still have some guys on their team that can play, good individuals. It's just he really can't bring it together. And then Alex Golish, like you said at USF, I think no matter what type of year that he even finishes out with, I think he's going to have a big job offer on the line, no matter what. I mean, they're going to be bowl eligible. They'll win, 9 games. They might win 10 games. Doesn't really matter to him. I think he's going to have whatever spot that's open, and he's going to he's at least going to have an interview.
So I guess the question becomes, we talk about the coaching carousel and how a lot of these guys, I think they're taking advantage of the gap between. So I'll look at Kirk Cignetti as a great example of this. For whatever reason, he's unbelievable with his offense and just the way that they score points. Mike Shanahan is the offensive coordinator there. Mendoza's a Heisman hopeful, and then Curtis Rourke last year, same thing, was and had incredible numbers. And so I look at a guy like that. He knows exactly what he's looking for and exactly what he's doing. He's probably getting a SEC job. I don't know that Big Ten school that he would go to opens up. So you have that job is probably going to him or something like that. Is a let's say you're the Memphis coach, the South Florida coach, the Tulane coach, or you're even Fran Brown at Syracuse. Is a job not in the SEC or a job not in the Big Ten something you'd even accept? Would you take a Big 12?
Unless it's Texas Tech, we're talking about a program with unlimited resources at this point, something like that. There's nothing really enticing about the Big 12, considering a lot of those programs outside of 3 or 4 schools are still kind of stepping stone
Yeah.
opportunities. I mean, you've seen what Fran Brown's been able to do at Syracuse. Like I said, I don't really know what's going on with Clemson this year. Maybe there's a tell-all story at the end that we all are going to read that's going to tell us why everybody looks like they just hate playing at Clemson this season. But I think schools or I think coaches like Fran Brown, those guys are better off staying put for 1 or 2 more seasons because you never know what can open up. And these buyouts obviously are getting a little ridiculous. And so I think it's going to be harder to fire certain guys because certain clauses are going to become kind of standard in contracts. So it might be hard for some guys to get fired after a season or two, but you never know what can happen. I mean, Luke Fickell might get fired at Wisconsin. Wisconsin might not be a terrible job. There's talent up north up there. There's talent that Wisconsin could get. They just haven't had good coaching in a while, but that spot could be lucrative to a coach that like Fran Brown, but at the end of the day, Wisconsin's still not an upper tier Big Ten program. Until they are, then I don't think so. But I think you're better off staying put at some of these other schools and waiting for that right opportunity to be open.
I think when you look at, let's first, it's two things. First, let's define what an upper tier program is. We have name brands, so Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia. Like we have these big brands. But then I think what Texas Tech is kind of showing us is that if you have enough money, you too can be a big brand and go get guys. We look at Miami as kind of the same way. And so I look at, let's just take Fran Brown as an example. Let's say he would go to Wisconsin. What would make that program a great program for him to go to, one that he could build, would just be having enough budget to compete with everybody else in the Big Ten and spending. So I think that what we looked at as like a job we probably wouldn't want to take turns into a really good opportunity when you get a billionaire like Texas Tech to invest
Mhm.
in the school and in the resources that you have. And so I think we're going to start seeing this happen. Texas Tech maybe being the one of the first examples where a huge injection of money turns into a ton of wins, and then that all of a sudden makes you a really good program to be at. So I don't know what the next school like that will be, but like we will know quickly in the offseason who the next one is.
That's true.
That's one. The second thing would be talked about coaches staying put. One coach that I think maybe kicks himself a little bit when it comes to not moving schools is Matt Campbell. There was a time, I think he was his second or third year there. And actually, as a matter of fact, I was in junior college getting recruited by Iowa State. They didn't offer me, of course, but I went on two visits to Iowa State. Iowa State was the game I went to actually, but he was a guy where he had an undefeated season and ended up losing at the very end. And this is like college football playoff, but like there's only four teams. And so he was a guy who was getting mentioned in NFL team names. He was getting mentioned at different like SEC Big Ten schools, and he decided to stay. And that window's could probably close. And so we all acknowledge he's a good coach, but he doesn't have that same, I guess, name recognition across the country that maybe these big schools are
Hmm.
looking for because he sat too long. And so my encouragement to a Fran Brown or Kurt Signetti as an example, it's take the next best job that comes to you because all it takes is one recruiting class, one really good cycle, and Kurt's already had one. But you have to take it because if you don't, you run the risk of your team not being very good. People say, "Oh, it's just lucky. Oh, it's just the OC. Oh, it's just the DC," and then you get stuck at this place earning less. So I think a lot of these coaches are going to take that leap because they've seen like Eli Jinkowitz is a great example. They hired
Yeah.
from Appalachian State, and you're like, who? But then
Right.
he turns up, and let's say it didn't work out for him at Mizzou, then he'd go back to some, American League Conference school, Sun Belt somewhere, and coach him up really well, UNLV probably. Um, but if you miss your window, like it could be over. So I don't look at Fran Brown or any of these coaches. Georgia Tech's Brent Key as an example. I don't. He gets an opportunity. You have to take those job openings when they come because you don't know when the next one's going to show up.
And that could be a fork in the road as far as your coaching reputation going forward. You miss out on a recruiting or not a recruiting cycle, but on a coaching carousel cycle. You stay 1 or 2 years longer, you have bad seasons, and then now you're losing out on millions of dollars or even just the opportunity to coach at one of those programs. And
Yeah,
so,
and show that you are, one of the best coaches
right.
out there.
Yeah.
So this past week, actually a good week, if you guys were able to check out the picks that I laid out for the college football weekend, I had six of them. We ended up going 4-2, and I'll read off the matchups and what they were. So we had Texas Tech at Utah. Utah was a favorite, -3.5. I took Utah. That was a bad one. Auburn versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma was a 6.5 point favorite. I took Oklahoma there. Michigan was a 2.5 point favorite at Nebraska. We took Michigan. Miami was a 7.5 point favorite against Florida. We took Miami. South Carolina at Mizzou. I took Mizzou -10.5. That one kind of stung. And then Illinois at Indiana was a
Whew.
5.5 favorite. And so I was like, okay, so we lost the Utah one and we ended up
Yeah.
losing the Mizzou one. Now I'll start with Utah. I thought that Utah was just a more physical team. I thought they would win in the trenches. I didn't give Texas Tech and that recruiting class, that transfer portal, enough respect. That defensive line is disgusting. The offensive line can do whatever they want. They even had Baron Morton ended up going out with a concussion. It looked like targeting, but wasn't targeting. He goes
Hmm.
out. The backup, who's a sophomore, steps in and he balls out. And they score like 24 points with him as the quarterback. So that team is talented enough to win games with almost a revolving door at quarterback. So I have to give them a ton of respect. And then Mizzou not covering the 10.5 at South Carolina. When I saw the game unfolding the way it was, I knew it was a terrible bet. I was like, this isn't going to be a good one. Mizzou doesn't have or didn't have, I don't think, the pull away power to beat down a SEC team like that. Winning by 9 points in an SEC game is impressive enough because we all think South Carolina is a pretty solid squad. So no
Right.
knock against that. But when it comes to betting, that 10.5 points was a lot. Probably could have taken South Carolina for that one, and that'd have been a good bet. Um, Oklahoma at home against Auburn. This game was way closer than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I,
Same.
I'm going to give Jackson Arnold a ton of credit. I believe it's Cam Coleman
Hmm.
is the big time receiver there at Auburn. He is ridiculous, and I saw a few different pundits for college football talking about if they could just get the ball over the top. Hugh Freeze talked about we're going to take deep shots. To their credit, they freaking did. And they made that game incredibly difficult. Oklahoma doesn't cover unless they get that late sack at the very end of the game,
Hmm.
ended up being a safety. So that game was very, very tight. In a 7 point win probably isn't even indicative of how close that game actually was. If those two teams met at a neutral site, that could have gone a different way. And then we had Michigan on the road beating Nebraska by 3. The thing about Nebraska was they were down 10 points two different times in that game. I thought this is going to get away from them, it's going to get away from them. And they just kept battling back. And I think we have to give Nebraska a ton of credit for how good and how resilient they are. I just think Michigan's ahead of schedule. And I think that there are a lot of people who look at that Michigan team and go, oh, damn, like they're going to be a force and they're already pretty good. So Bryce Underwood is a stud. He's showing that he could be true the next Cam Newton, kind of the next like he wins the Heisman, he's the number one draft pick, and he turns around an NFL franchise at just how talented he already is. Some refinement, but he'll get there. We took Miami and the points 7.5 over Florida. I didn't think Florida had enough firepower. This game didn't start out as a what was going to be a blowout and ended up turning into that. Carson Beck ended up being too much. I think Florida just is. I'm not sure if they quit on Bailey Napier. I'm not sure what it is with that team, but the defense is clearly really good. The offense struggles, and we both thought DJ Lightweight would have a much better year this year. And then
Absolutely.
Illinois at Indiana was, in my opinion, this was probably the one I felt the most confident about. Kurt Signetti does not lose to teams that have rosters similar to his or worse. In fact, they boat race everybody they play against who doesn't have as good of a roster. And it's one of the reasons I think he's one of the best coaches in America. He does not play down to competition. His teams always play their best no matter who they're playing. And so Illinois, I wasn't a huge believer. The Duke game kind of showed me that first half if a team had similar rosters that we could see like a dogfight. And I didn't think they'd beat
That's a
them
good
the way
point.
they did, but I did think that Indiana was going to
That's a
get
good
them over
point.
the top, and that ended up being our winner as well.
Wow. Well, yeah, that was a pretty solid week going forward into you can win some people some money for sure. I actually kind of want to do like kind of a newer segment as we close out the episode, and I want you to guess. I'm gonna read off some games, and I want you to guess the lines of these games. And we're gonna start with number 4 LSU at number 13 Ole Miss. What do you think that spread is?
I think Ole Miss is or LSU is going to be the favorite.
Mm.
They're at on the road. Typically, you give the home team 3 points. I'm going to say that's a 2.5 point edge to LSU. What's the line
Mississippi
there?
State minus 1.5.
Wait, Mississippi is Ole Miss or
Or
Mississippi
Miss Ole,
State?
I'm off at Ole Miss minus one or minus 1.5.
I would take Ole Miss
Yeah, Ole Miss minus
without
one and a
question.
half.
I would take them without their
Yeah.
offense is LSU's offense is not very good. We'll get into maybe betting later on this week in our next episode,
Yeah.
but go to the next one.
Underrated Auburn, unranked versus at number 9 Texas A&M. What do you think?
These are two offenses that really rely on the deep ball being part of the catalyst to that offense. Auburn runs the ball very well. That's what they want to do. Both these teams have very similar profiles. Both very solid defenses, very good fronts. The quarterback is not the most refined passer, but he will throw it deep. And they have two really good running backs. Both teams have good running backs. So this profile is actually really interesting. I would say it's Texas A&M, and they're probably favored by 4.5.
Close, minus 6.5.
6.5 is
Close.
a lot of points the way
Yeah,
I saw
it is
Auburn play.
definitely. It definitely is. That one's a little too high for me. Number 21 USC at number 23 Illinois.
USC probably by 6 points. I think USC is a
Mm,
much
you got
better.
that one on the nose, six and a
Yeah,
half USC
yeah.
on the road. And then one last one. Let me see. Oh, Alabama, number 17 Alabama at number 5 Georgia.
Game of the week. Georgia's gonna be favored. I think they're probably the better team at this point, but we've seen DeBoer has the number for Kirby. Give me Georgia minus 5.5.
Ooh, okay. That one actually Georgia minus 2.5. So a little bit
Wow.
closer. So
There's some value
I
there.
think Vegas is kind of on your side where it's like, okay, DeBoer's got Kirby's number a little bit, and then Alabama might be back on the uptick. As a lot of people wanted to write them
That's
off
a
really
tough
early
one.
in the season. I think Alabama might get the wheels rolling. And I just said the last one, but we are forgetting number 6 Oregon at number 3 Penn State. What do you got?
Penn State defense is really good, or at least that's what we think they are. Oregon's offense is really good. We've seen that. Give me Oregon favored by 4.5.
Well, Penn State minus 3.5. Favored right now. I think that line will
Wow.
drop a little bit. It'll probably be Penn State 2.5 going into the weekend. Just the home game. I don't know if it's a whiteout. It's 6:30 game, so it might be whiteout. So we'll see about that. Really good spot for Dante Moore. I
Heisman.
really want to see him. I'm not gonna say that he hasn't proved it yet, but I think this is his first spot this year where it's like, okay, you're going on the road against Penn State with a defensive line that we know is good, a defense that we know is well put together. We're gonna see what he's made of for sure. And I think Oregon is legit. I think Oregon actually is really good. Like I said, these teams could flip flop rankings after this game because I do think Oregon's actually gonna win this game.
Well, just a mini preview then. Like Oregon is the bet of the week. Oregon is a better team. Then Penn State, so the wrong team is favored there. That's probably one that I would want to lock in right now. And then did you mention Ole Miss is favored against LSU?
Correct, 1.5.
Yeah, that's one where I'm taking, and they're at home too. I'm probably taking Ole Miss there as well. So there are a couple, there's some
Huge
value.
spot for Trinidad Chambliss. I mean,
Huge.
this is a game where he can propel himself into the Heisman race for sure.
He'll propel himself into NFL draft conversations. Like, let's not, he's probably what people think John Mateer is. He's probably that plus a
He
little
might be better.
more.
I mean, he legit he might be the best quarterback in the country. We just haven't seen it quite yet.
And I think Lane Kiffin knows exactly how to attack a Brian Kelly defense. That's gonna be a great game. We'll talk
It's
about
gonna
our
be a
bets in
great
the
game.
next episode, but that's gonna be a
Yep.
lot of fun.
First and Cam, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode. If you stayed this long, we appreciate it. If you haven't already subscribed to the page, do that. Please give a like on the video and comment. Let us know what you think of our takes this week and what our predictions are for next week. Like I said, we're going another betting episode later on this week. We will talk about our bets and who we think is going to win out of those games. And we will see you guys in a couple of days.